Going live.
All right.
All right, we are live and talking. So,
Good evening.
good evening, Ted. Good to have you on the show again. Hear him again. Having a good time with me, and just talking about everything that we are interested in. The show is meant for AEC, tech, life, or anything that we are both interested in. So today I'm actually going to let Ted take the lead here as he's got some things that he wanted to talk about, and I thought it would be both interesting and useful for me, and hopefully for all of you guys who will be watching live and record as well. So, Ted, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go right into it. Uh, how do you feel, Joseph, for paying for another subscription?
I'm actually, I'll tell you right off the bat, I say no to subscriptions all the time. I don't even pay Google or like a simple cloud service. But go ahead.
Right. No, I totally get you, and I'm in the same boat. I have so many subscriptions. I have Sketchfab, I have Polygon, I have Design Connected, I have Google Teams, FreshBooks, Bench, and just like they stack up so fast. But as a business, I'm in the business of making money, and we've been spitballing ways to make money on a regular basis. How do we um, how do we more effectively democratize rendering? Because one of the things that we have a problem with, and I think a lot of businesses that are service based, like Archviz or architecture, tend to have similar issues with um, regular residual income. How do you continually have money coming in to support both your team, R&D into future products and development, projects, and everything else, software and everything? How do you make that um, service that you provide valuable enough that somebody wants to pay for it, but keep coming back as a client? And we've been toying around with some ideas in-house for different kinds of sort of retainer fees, subscription models, and residual income. And we've been trying to figure out what those price points kind of look like. And I thought tonight might be a good idea to sit down, talk to you, see what we get in the chat, and hear about, which might be dangerous, but hear what other people have to say, and hear a little bit about kind of where things are going to go and what this kind of thought experiment might look like. So what we've been toying around with is there's a fixed price for unlimited renderings. I know that sounds scary. Unlimited rendering sounds like a lot of renderings, but with the way things have been going, with the advent of real-time rendering, the traditional render and wait methodology isn't really as um, troublesome as it used to be. I mean, we've got enough hardware we can do the really high-end rendering stuff, but we've also got this sort of mid-tier point where, maybe the architect doesn't need perfect photoreal, but they're not in the game of I have a team or a staff willing to sit down and make every design change that I make visual for the client. So how do you potentially do that and make it valuable both to you and the customer? So we've been kind of kicking around the idea of what is a comfortable price point for a client that says we will do as many renderings as you want, as long as you're paying this fee for the modeling revisions that we are doing in your project model. So we essentially then become an extension of the architect, where they can do the initial design work, scratch on paper their ideas, send it over to us, we model it up, send them back an image. And what does that business model end up looking like, and how does that effectively solve the pain point of the architect? I have too many projects and not enough time, and I need to show the client progress and design iterative design progress. Now, for you, you don't really need that because you have a very good sense of design visualization as an architect. But what I've found is not a lot of architects have that. Or if they do have that, they don't have the time to go sit down and go through the motions of generating iteration after iteration after iteration of design. So, yeah, that's kind of what we've been spitballing in the office is what does that kind of business model end up looking like? You
Hmm.
know?
I mean, I have some, I guess, reservation for that idea, especially who. So people who has the need or feel the need to do iterative design and renderings whilst designing are gonna be motivated enough to learn it themselves and actually be able to do it themselves is what I kind of feel like how and that's who I was. That's what I was.
Hmm.
I felt like, man, I wish I can do some good looking rendering so I can actually sell my project to either a client or I started off at school. So like, doing rendering was cool thing to do
Hmm.
and I wish I can do it. And I just felt the need and I thought it would be cool to learn sort of these technology or weird something rendering called V-Ray, and I thought it would be a cool thing to do.
Right.
And
So
that's
how many guys let me ask you a question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
go
how many
ahead.
guys like you are in your office? Like out of the entire office, how many guys are like you?
Two,
Exactly.
including myself. So it was just me and one other. I mean, my current firm is a very traditional. Half of the people are still on AutoCAD, and only another half is on Revit. So,
Hmm.
people who are still in AutoCAD, you can't really expect them to do anything. And also, people who does everything in Revit, and I just turn on Enscape and show it to them, and I'm like, "Whoa, what did you render this with? This is your model, the model that you've been making. I'm just turning it on and then
Yep.
just showing it.
Yep.
I'm not doing anything extra. Like, oh, you didn't have to put material. No, no, no lighting. Let's just
You already put the materials on.
you already have done the material. You already have put down everything. This is just literally just looking at your model at with the rendering engine. That's it. Like that's all you need
Right.
to do. But we also am not equipped with computers with meaningful discrete graphics card to run
Hmm.
it. That's another completely different matter. But there's definitely need for it, and only a handful of people recognize it. So that's where I was leading to. So only handful of people have the need and also sort of the motivation to go for visualization and feel like they need to piggyback on this sort of technology or whatever the computer offers you. Otherwise, they'll just resort to the pen and sketch paper method in order to
Yep.
sell the idea, which I think is fine. But again, when project becomes complex, when you're really trying to sell the story and when you're really trying to visualize some complex things that people are not used to, especially like yes, you can sell your project with a thick felt tip pen and just really convey that emotion of a project, but also it is really useful to just look at a video of what your project possibly may be, just emerging from the inside of a fog or
Right.
and
Right.
just like aerial view and just understanding what the context is. Like it's all of those are just really useful. So people who recognize those things and people who have experienced this will have additional motivation in that. And that's what I typically try to sell myself as well to
Hmm.
the people who hold the right to hire or purchase more graphics card in that matter.
Yeah.
And I have sold to them, and they're completely on board with that. But to convince another coworker, hey, you can turn it on, and you can just look at your model, and it's gonna look that way, and they understand that, but they will never turn it on.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's what I'm seeing as the kind of datum within the office, because that's exactly how it was at my office. So I used to work at GFF, Good Fulton and Farrell Architects in Dallas, Texas. Phenomenal firm, great people, super culture, like office culture was great. But it was myself and like two, maybe three other young guys in the office who really focused on Archviz, and really enjoyed it. And honestly, I got really bored building container store drawings, and like we did, I think 30 of the container stores in a year. Um, I don't recommend it. It becomes monotonous, but it was such a process. I learned so much doing that. It was valuable. But within that, we were also tasked with providing 2 to 3 renderings per project. That was billed within the overall budget, and I got tasked with doing that. One thing led to another, and I got pretty good at the illustrations for those, which got me working on other projects. And it was a lot of fun. But again, it was a situation where the office got bigger, the projects got bigger, and it was still only 3 of us who could do these renderings consistently. And it became overbearing because I was doing my regular work plus the rendering work. So I was in there from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then extra stuff on the weekends. And I was getting paid overtime, so it wasn't that big a deal. And maybe that is cost effective for most studios. But if I can find a price point where I say my team and I will act as your um, intern, let's say, that we will do all of your base level rendering tasks. We're not going to do like super high end photoreal stuff, but everything that comes through the office, you need a half a dozen renderings that are going into a presentation by tomorrow. Send us the project, we'll get it wrapped up and send it back to you if we're on a reoccurring model. If we've already had the contract, because then what it takes off of my plate is setting up a contract, saying, what do you have? What do we need? Okay, it's going to be this much per rendering, flat rate, plus this much for modeling, as many hours as we think it's going to take to model this thing. So we're on a reoccurring model. So when it's slow, we're getting paid. But when it's busy, we're using those hours, and we may end up being busy 2 or 3 months in a row and then not doing anything for 2 or 3 months in a row. So it ends up balancing itself out. So we may be able to charge a lower fee for our rendering work, or our iterative rendering style. And then the client ends up paying less per image and getting a better product than what they otherwise might be able to produce in-house with their limited staff of 3D artists that they might have. And the other nice part about this is, if we are pitching it right and we are, developing the, financial profile of this, we're still making money, and we can give them a discount on going to the higher tier quality renderings that they might need later on down the line. We've got everything lined up, and it's just a matter of, sitting down with the latest revision and updating the project and firing off some really nice, images. So that's my theory. Um, it it might work, it might not work, and I'm thinking of piloting something like this with a couple of clients that we've been working with. I hopped on late, but has the customer communicated the value to you in the cost? Has the customer communicated the value to you in the cost. I'm not sure exactly what he's asking.
I
Joseph, what do you
think
think?
I think if Jonathan Maddox is asking what the cost of this may be, and Ted was actually asking me what the cost may be for a subscription like
Well,
this.
I'm not specifically asking. I've got an idea of what it sounds like to me. Like I feel like architects aren't going to pay more than $1,000 to $1,500 a month for something like this.
No, I highly doubt it. If I think it's better. It's gonna be really hard sale for people who's never experienced your service. Like it, so
Right,
it
right.
would have to be someone who regularly comes to you as a customer, and then
Yep.
hey, we can do this for $1,500, but also you can subscribe to this model at X price, and
Yeah.
then we can just continue the communication. So copy me on designs and the iterative designs that you do, and then every now and then just kick me off with a model, then we'll turn around these set views and then render it out for you. You don't have to then worry about your machine. You don't have to worry about people spending extra time for renderings or setting up the views or anything like that. And I think that is a good value proposition
Hmm.
where continued customer just comes by. For me, however, so like I do some renderings on the side, and I do have
Hmm.
some clients that kind of repeat over the years. Obviously, I don't try to expend that as much because my time's limited
Hmm.
between all the YouTube and the day jobs and all.
Oh, you got
Um,
plenty of time. Just don't
but
sleep.
but also it kind of keeps me on edge, like in terms of like, I need to retrain my thoughts, and that's a good opportunity to test out some of the latest things that are available. So I think it's a good mix in terms of like amount of work, and
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
variety of, it's not, every day I'm doing these sort of architectural drawing that doesn't really encompasses the actual design workflow. Design is done by somebody else. I'm just doing the models
Hmm.
in the day work. But then, when it comes to these small visualization tasks that are coming on the weekends, then I get to think about how to render these things. I get to test out the latest function of a different type of renders,
Right,
and
right,
then I get to kind of like compare, which modeler, which rendering engine should I use,
right. And
so
you're doing this more as a freelance thing, just kind of like
no,
I'm
it is
kicking the tires of
absolutely,
things.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is absolutely freelance, and it just wins me like a evening out with my wife and such. That's all I
Right.
needed. But I think for me, the way I kind of planned this out was that because I value these repeats and they understand how I work and I understand how they work. And because of that, I do sort of pay as you go type of model rather than subscription. It's because I
Pay
can't.
as you go. Wait, wait, wait. I'm curious about this. Elaborate on pay as you go sort of model.
Right. So I will render as many views as possible because I convey early on. As long as you pay me to model this thing, because these are people who are not modeling their thing. They're
Hmm.
just handing me sort of design ideas, and I work as like a designer slash rendering person, but more as a rendering person. But d- I, I,
You
I
fill in the gaps.
I fill in the gaps, but also, as a rendering professional, anyone who does Archviz, you have to have your own set of styles and eyes for the design, and you are artists at work. So you have to have appreciative sort of design eye, and I feel like that is valued in that way. So I asked them to pay me by hour rather than a snapshots, how many shots of renderings. I don't ever put a price to X amount of renderings that I do. I say,
Hmm.
hey, I'm gonna provide renderings that conveys the idea that you are trying to put together, and also, but I'm gonna put a price to how long it takes to model and prep, and I make them understand, hey, these renderings actually don't take time nowadays. I can just flip the button and then there's your snapshot. And also, I provide them standalone, so if they want, they can just go swim in it. So
Right.
I sell all of that as a package, but I don't put a price on it. I give them estimated time that I'm going to spend, and then they are going to pay me as per hours that I spend. And also,
Right.
I report to them almost every other day or weekly as I progress so that they can actually see where I'm progressing.
Right. So that is valuable at your price point because as a freelancer, your hourly rate, I imagine, is substantially lower than what my hourly rate as a business is. Correct?
Absolutely.
Right. Because and to the a lot of people I don't think understand that freelancers and business owners are very different sort of
Here's a
animals.
question
And
that is kind of related to that.
yeah,
Ming Chen is asking a beginner question. How do architects normally charge people for clients? So how
that's
do
a
that's a
big
what
question. It's a big
from
little question.
big little question, but I have my answer in that, but I also want to have take your opinion on that because
So again, this comes down to are you a freelancer or are you a business owner? Because as a business owner, I have to look at okay, how much does my employee cost? How much does my hourly rate cost to coordinate the project? Uh, how much is my overhead? And of those three things, and there's additional things in there, how much at an hourly rate do all of those things together cost? Because it's a blended rate between those three elements. I don't have it handy. I should have pulled it out. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't think of it till uh, Ming Chan asked this question. There's a really good um, outline of percentages to think about when you're doing this. And I think also, not to steer traffic away from your site, but 30 by 40 has a really good explanation of this, probably
no,
better than mine.
he does.
Um,
Absolutely, Eric.
yeah, yeah. So when you are calculating these different elements, you create a blended rate, and that is the cost per hour for your time as a business. So our company runs, depending on the project and the scope of work, between 100 and $150 an hour, depending on what we're doing. And it sounds expensive to the client, but the reality of it is we've got a team of people who do all very specialized things that help get the project done. Now, you as a freelancer have to figure out what your time costs because you're the only one typically working on this. Maybe you and one other guy, but as a freelancer, what you need to consider is how long it's going to take a project. You need to estimate what the project is. If you think it's a 50-hour project, you need to keep that in mind. How many of those hours are going to be spent on what parts of the project and what parts of the project are the most labor intensive, and then figure out what the cost associated with each part of that project is, or figure out what a flat rate is that you want to be paid per hour, that covers all of those different hours. Again, I'm probably not explaining this so well because I'm on the fly. Um, but it's one of those things where you have to figure out what your value is and then apply that to your, cost to client. So if you're saying that I'm going to bill the client $50 an hour, well, is that enough when you include the software that you own, the computer that you bought, and the things that you are doing, the hours spent? Is $50 an hour enough? Is it too much? If it's too much and the client is willing to pay for it, that's profit, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You should never feel bad for charging the client what you feel you are worth. Now, I'm not saying to gouge the client, but you should value your time because the client values your time. That's why they hired you. So, I know I didn't completely answer Ming's question necessarily,
It
but
was kind of overall casted kind of question. I
yeah.
feel like I'm also trying to approach this question in a more sort of the structural way. At a most basic level, because I don't know what Ming was exactly alluding
Hmm.
to, but most basic level, you are charging your client of the fee is usually how it is priced at, because typically renderings are not part of the design, like a normal design package. What people pay, the clients pay architects for, is basically drawings that you actually stamp and then take it to the city.
Which I feel is bad, but go on.
Yes, and architects could sell different packages. They can do architectural studies. They can do feasibility, schematics, detailed. I'm assuming you're coming from some architectural school background, but you can do all of that, and the end result is actual construction documents. Take it to
Hmm.
the permit, and then people also pay architect to do construction administration to look after the project whilst it is in construction. Now, where rendering comes in is in question. Now, it could be at a very conceptual level where you are doing feasibility studies so that it's a good amount of massing and how the volumetric of this design works within the site and context. That could be one of the things. At a schematic design or detailed design phase, you can do all of this so that you can actually experience your project whilst being inside that sort of rendering, so that you can actually sell the story of your project. But it could also be helpful when you cut up the model and then show sections of how all of these are built together. That's actually really, really helpful for construction admin process. But also, I've seen another case where, okay, you finish everything and then now you're into marketing. You're actually trying to sell this thing, and you do rendering so that you seek out potential tenants. It could be you're selling to this millionaire that's somewhere in the Middle East who's never going to visit your site but still going to purchase your project, kind of thing. So
Correct.
it's everything from concept to where the rendering could be, and then typically when architect is pricing the project to the client, obviously you're going to have to follow the rules that Ted just mentioned in terms of management and all the overheads and how much you would like to be paid for. And in school, they should kind of touch you on those things. But obviously, all of that gets thrown out the window if you're just really needing work or doing some sort of
Hmm.
freelance on the side, because you've got all of these equipments like I've got equipments, I've got things, and I've got a little more time. So how do I fill in the gaps? And that's what I'm doing. So the price would be completely differently structured for that matter. But that's how you end up billing the client. And any architects could bill it as additional services. And that's typically how I have seen it go in. But also, you can have it as a bit more vague. Not
Right.
necessarily, hey, here's going to be like three renderings that we're going to do for, and these are priced at whatever price, like additional services. You can do it that way. Or you can be design review. So you're going to have total of 4 design reviews, and it could have X amount of renderings or any sort of diagrams that you do. So these design review process is going to have renderings and all of those design ideas that you're going to pitch to the client so that we can all be on the same page and convey the design together.
Right. So this is where I feel like the iterative rendering, which I think I want to paint a picture here.
For
An
those design
iterative,
review
yeah, an
session.
iterative rendering is not the same as a marketing rendering. A finished marketing rendering is something very different. than an iterative rendering. An iterative rendering is designed to show the owner, client, or team a design concept to generate validation and approval of that design concept prior to construction. I think renderings fit in all three of the design development uh, positions: in the early schematic design, in the design development, and in the construction documentation. Now, what those renderings are is different. The schematic design renderings are loose and fast and designed to show iteration through design ideas. They should not be completely photoreal or even remotely photoreal. Cartoony is better. Honestly, SketchUp renderings are the best at that stage. When you get into design development and you're picking out finishes, fixtures, appliances, things like that, I think, or design development, not necessarily speccing things, but thinking about how the space is coming together. You're starting to build that FF&E. Um, that is when a more finished iterative rendering happens. And then in the final construction documentation phase, that's when you start doing the marketing images. Now, what we've been doing with a development team out in LA is just that. So we came on board right as the interiors team has started their design work. And what has happened is it's given the client a much stronger understanding of what the space will potentially look like, and he's making changes earlier in the design process. He's saying, I like this, I don't like that, I like this, I don't like that. Now it's giving the designer a little bit more headache because they're having to make more revisions than they normally would, but in the long run, it's going to save that client a lot of money because he's making those decisions prior to construction. He knows roughly what they're going to look like when they build them. And when you're dealing with really high-end luxury homes in LA in the $20 to $30 million range, a vanity is going to cost you about $30,000. So if you mess up a vanity, it gets expensive quickly. So why not do this early on? And one of the things that I struggle with a lot of designers is communicating the value within an iterative process like that, and having somebody on the team, doesn't have to be me, but somebody on your team who can visually communicate the design concept to the client in such a way that the client feels comfortable with moving forward. Because more often than not, you would be amazed at how, I don't want to say uneducated somebody is, because they shouldn't be. This is a very specific kind of career path that we're on as architects and designers. But the average person, the layperson, does not fully grasp what a plan, elevation, and section drawing communicate. If you put a plan in front of somebody who has never seen a plan, and I did this today with an intern, it was really kind of funny. She's studying art at RISD. She is looking at a plan, and I've got her doing some work on it, and she looks at it and she goes, "What is this?" Not the plan itself. She understood that it was a floor plan, but specifically she looks at the staircase. Right, just on a plan, a staircase. If you look at a staircase on a plan and you don't know what a plan staircase looks like, it just looks like a whole lot of lines drawn on a piece of paper, and it makes
these
absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
And she says, wait a minute, why is there an arrow? And what's this squiggly line? And why is the rest of this all dashed lined? And just totally confused. And you have to understand that most of your clients who are not developers, that's how they look at plans. That's how they look at your plan and elevation. They don't understand how they translate to each other. So, having that additional level of illustrative communication is important. And that's kind of how I am looking at developing this secondary business model of, we almost act as an additional team member for your team to take over everything um, that is not specifically related to design or um, design development. We handle everything from PDF presentations to renderings to um, simple diagrams, and say, these are the things that we'll do, these are the number of hours you get. It's the unlimited rendering model, like what you were talking about. So you're essentially getting paid by the hour, but it's a contract over time. So, it's something we've been toying with in the office. We've got a couple of clients who are on a 3-month tester for this. And so far, the results have been pretty good with the developers. It has not been so great with the architects yet.
No,
So
with the architecture, I would say, I mean, because the amount of drawings that you have to do in with the deadline meeting, it's just such an hassle. Just in real practice, finishing up everything day early so that you can ship it off to somebody to handle it overnight. It seems a lot of
it
management.
does, it does. But what we've been finding is if the architect is willing to, you know, send us the stuff as it's changing, it tends to work. We've got one architectural client who seems to be pretty happy with the process, but they're also a very organized architect.
Yep, yep.
So I think that also has a lot to do with it.
Right.
How
Organized
organized
architect
are you?
who values the renderings on those iterative designs, as well as, and the chances are that organized architect who values those things have enough of motivation for them to do it themselves. That's another thing.
Sometimes. So,
Um, I'm trying to actually answer Jonathan's question. So his question was, do you have render templates or stylus? I think he means styles set up to help you along with creating visuals and time for reiterations. And my answer to that was to turn on the outlines just to kind of keep things a bit more conceptual and not as realistic. And I was actually typing up another answer to that to have people as a silhouette, but I always fail to spell silhouettes, so I'm just gonna say it instead.
don't ask
Um,
me how to spell it either. Um,
yeah. Just so that because as soon as you recognize real looking people, I was just gonna say don't have real looking people instead of spelling out silhouettes. But don't have real looking people. Once you have these recognizable faces and people, the
hmm
project is an immediate giveaway that you're shooting for sort of the realistic look. Whereas if
Yeah,
things are boxy, not as materialized and with outlines, and if anything, actually it helps to have silhouetted people because that gives you the sort of notion of, hey, this is conceptual. This is meant to be
yeah,
like a mood image of that's more conceptual than realistic type of image, and it saves time too.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, as far as the rendering side of that, yeah, having templates definitely helps. Styles, I mean, in SketchUp, you've got the entire style palette that you can set up, and we've done some of that. I find that having too many templates can be problematic, though, too, because you get into a rut where it's just, everything looks the same after a while. Almost like it's like slapping a Lumion style on something, everybody's render looks the same. So I tend to steer away from having a specific style, but having collections that are valuable. So collections of furniture, collections of assets, collections of plants and tree models that are ready to go. Then it's more like playing a video game, and it's just like plopping things in, and you know what works and you know what doesn't.
I mean, you're playing Sims at that point,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
literally snapshotting as you go. And another few other thoughts that popped in my head whilst you were talking. One is whilst I was in London, we had our company had sort of a business contract with somewhere in Asia. I don't want to say exactly where, but actually it's not China, but somewhere in Asia where they have contracted group of people to carry out very basic tasks, whether it be modeling or documentation or so basically, when they are done with the business hours and when they're about to go home, they just send off this more sort of basic task or sort of repeat task over to that firm and
Mm-hmm.
then go home. And then as soon as you arrive home, all of these cloud models that you have worked on now has everything tagged correctly, everything drawn up correctly because over whilst you're sleeping, another group of people on the other side of the globe had been working. Now,
Yep.
I want to actually kind of take that. So, hey, I've got a design review meeting tomorrow morning, and here is a model that I kind of finished up, and then send it off to you, and then overnight you work on these renderings. For you, it's not necessarily overnight. For them, it is, but it's during the daytime. So if you shoot for somebody in I would say in Europe, or maybe even further on, so somewhere in Asia,
I
who's
see what you're
needing to,
saying.
and then as soon as they finish, then they can just ship off the stuff to you, and then overnight you can render it up and then package it all together for them to hold the presentation together. That's
Yeah, I
one
see where you're
thought.
coming from with that.
There's a
Yeah.
one thought, and the second one was, um, gosh, I'm blanking out now. Oh yeah, in-house team. So on a larger firm that I worked at, had an in-house graphic team. So basically, they're putting together everything from mostly doing InDesign stuff, and a lot of architects and designers were able to handle InDesign themselves to put packages together. They knew
Right.
exactly what to do. I can do that, but some people weren't, and
But
at the same time, some people weren't able to do any renderings whatsoever. So they have in-house team who are in office, and then whenever these time come up for presentations and needing to send the packages, either booklet or digital print or PDF
right.
sets, then they utilize this team that are just in office for different departments. So
Yep.
you can book them and then utilize their, so basically at that point it's sort of a subscription. So I
An
understand.
in-house subscription.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So basically, I feel like it can work the very similar way. You're like a designated team who are
Yep.
going to handle all of these presentation packages, because I feel like it would be very easy for you to handle sort of
Okay.
presentation package, not just solely focused on rendering, but also,
Mm-hmm.
putting them together, diagrams or, any sort of things that's going to convey the idea to. Obviously, you're going to have to work with the architect,
Yep.
but you understand the process, you understand the design, you're going to have much easier time putting that graphics together. So not
Right.
only just rendering, but also helping the presentation or conveying the idea as sort of a design package.
Yeah. Acting as an extension of the architect, essentially.
Right.
Yeah. Almost like an in-house contractor.
Right.
That's not in-house.
Yeah, yeah. And I think at that point you are acting as a graphic designer as well. But I think because you can do all the renderings and aim all the shots as it is necessary, I think it's going to be a lot easier to put the packages together. Obviously, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have all the templates ready for you, and then selling that as a sort of the subscription model. Hey, here's how many design packages that you can do with me as long as you provide me these models. And then
Yep.
whenever it is design review time, you can send me the models and I'll just fire up as many renderings and packages for you
Yep.
during your design process.
That's a great way to clarify this, because that's essentially what we're doing right now.
Hmm.
And It's been working really well. We actually are just wrapping up so the client came to us and said, okay, we're going for our construction loan for this particular project. Can you put together a presentation for us showing the project, where we're at, floor plans, elevations, yada, 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 and pull it all together. We need it by Thursday. And we were like, well, we've been working on the project for the better part of a month already. Yeah, we can do that. It's just bing, bang, boom,
Mm-hmm.
knock it out. So the value, I think, is typically seen more by the developers, which is
Mm-hmm.
typically what happens. But it's definitely there. And it's what kind of has spurred this conversation tonight is, from an architect's point of view, I think you've kind of helped shine a light on where the language it needs to be for how to communicate what this tool could be for an architect, what this subscription potentially could be for an architect, um, and see where it goes. The reason I've been thinking about this is I'm looking at Tilly and Modzy and a few of the other um, more democratized design rendering services. I'm going, well, how are they doing it? And what are the pitfalls that they're probably running into with this? And how can I do something similar with rendering, because they're already kind of doing that and adding renderings to it. So how do I differentiate myself from sort of a simplified design rendering for one of those kind of companies? So yeah, interesting. Just kind of spitballing with you about this. So.
Well, it's ideas. Another is when somebody is troubled. So let's say in-house person who understands the value and who's always trying to do these sort of renderings, but there's always time where like I just can't get this light working, or I just can't get this material to look right.
Oh, acting as a consultant.
And yep, I acting as a consultant. So here is a guy that I know who we have contracted with, a guy named Ted. He can actually tell you what to do when this kind of thing pops up. Is another aspect that could help people who people who understands the value and the need, and who wants to do motivated
Mm-hmm.
enough but just not have skin in the game deep enough to understand this, front and back. Then you can actually kind of work as, hey, in this kind of situation, here are the tips that you can use. Also, here's a process that you can do. And when you're really at a pinch, then you can actually use these services too. Is also
Yeah,
one of the way I pitch my freelance service, because I used to train a
interesting.
lot, one-on-one training for both SketchUp and rendering stuff too. I don't really do it anymore, but I have some residual clients who come here and then for just a sort of like a one-on-one session where I just designate some hours so that we go over things. And more oftentimes they're just really bogged with amount of times that they have on sort of the
Yep.
project schedule. They were just really they just hit a wall, and then hey Joseph, how do you do this? And so then we schedule an hour so that I kind of go over the tips and tricks, and then at the end of the day they may turn around and say, hey, can you actually do this, and I'll just pay you.
Yeah.
And that I also seen it happen very often. So
Yeah.
that may be another way to spin that around.
Interesting.
Obviously that's hourly rate though.
That's really interesting that you say that, though, because it's something that we had discussed a while ago as, hey, what if we approach this from an Archviz consulting point of view? We don't do the renderings, we just come in and help you guys build a team and learn how to communicate with your visualization team. Because I think that's a big part of this is not many architects understand how to communicate effectively with a Viz team. Um, because they don't understand what goes into it. They only see the end result and they're like, "Oh, you got this done last night? That was quick."
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, because I've been working on it since yesterday and it's went to bed at 2 a.m. Um,
Don't want
of
to do
course
that
it's
again.
done at 8. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where understanding the process and communicating with that team and understanding how to effectively communicate is really key. Um, there have been a I can I can't count the number of times where as an artist you've gotten the novice designer or the novice architect who just assumes that, hey, can you get these design changes done by noon? And there's no practical way because the design changes are so drastic that the modeling alone will take a day or two
Yeah.
or three to get done. So yeah, it's one of those things where understanding the craft and having a clear communication line between you and others is definitely important. Do you do guerrilla marketing to get new work or use online freelance websites like Fiverr and Upwork, for example?
I did used to work for Upwork. My profile still might be up there.
Yep.
So I used to freelance there. I had a few clients from there. I think one or two maybe still repeating every now and then.
Hmm.
But obviously I don't do works through that anymore. I've abandoned my profile a long time ago. For good reasons, but also I'm more expensive nowadays, so I can't really work
Yep.
in that. I can't really compete in there. That was when I was student, and I was just trying to use those as more learning opportunities and just face a bit new challenges here and there. And there were really
Yeah.
interesting projects here and there, and obviously it didn't really make much money. It was just more of hobby that kind of earns money. And for me, YouTube is
Right.
more of that now. So I don't
Yeah.
think I'll be participating in that. But why don't you speak for that
So,
question?
I mean, when I get in a pinch, sometimes I'll grab somebody off of Fiverr. If it's something like a small,
Modeling
let's
test.
say, no, I'd never use them for modeling.
Really?
It's usually graphic design stuff because I'm not the strongest graphic designer. To be completely honest, I have other artists who are better graphic designers than I am that I use. But when they're busy, I'll hop onto Fiverr. I need a brand mark for something that is not terribly important or earth-shattering for a client. Give me 3 or 4 brand marks, and it's reasonably priced. They crank them out really quickly. Um, Sometimes it can be hit or miss,
What's a
but
brand mark?
like so we just worked on a project called Verso,
Mm-hmm.
and brand mark is similar to a logo. It's essentially a logo, but it's a branding mark that is um, designed to differentiate um, like a building or something that you'll see around a project. So it's a logo. It's just a logo. That's all it is. Um, but I'm getting distracted here. So, anyways, I
Okay.
digress. Um, so a brand mark or a logo for a building that needs it, but may not necessarily need something really high end. You know, hey, we've
Simple
got a
tasks.
project. We need something for our brochure that is going out tomorrow, and I don't have the time to design it. I'll go to a freelance website like Fiverr or Upwork and find somebody. Now, do I work on Fiverr or Upwork? I've been on Upwork. I've never been on Fiverr for more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes as like an artist. I got on. I was like, I
Nah.
can't set up a professional portion of it. Like I'm running a business, unless I can set up a professional portal, um, and I have to be on there for a long time before I can set up a professional portal. It's not worth it for me. But as a freelancer, if you are starting out and you're looking for work, it's a great way to start building content and start building a clientele.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic for those people. I will say it feels a little bit like a race to the bottom, but you get what you pay for. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a
Everybody
crapshoot.
understands that. And then I think from there you can start to filter out the ones that you want to continue relationship
Yep.
with or not. And then in my case, they all, I don't know, they even like move the companies and they still talk to me in some basis for design
Hmm.
consulting, that sort of
Yep.
thing. So it's great in terms of developing your, as you said, profile and clientele and
Yep.
network.
There's
You got to
one that
start
I just
somewhere.
learned about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for business to business stuff, I just learned about it today. It's called Thumbtack. I'm just now checking it out. I know very little about it. It's interesting because it's more of a business to business sort of relationship building tool, where I think it's essentially you're asking as a business for recommendations from other businesses on a certain thing. And vice versa, as a business, you can be recommended for a certain thing.
I heard
So,
WeWork do that a bit. So, they have network of people who are working in the
oh,
office
okay.
and also in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So, whenever you're seeking for a certain type of service, who also uses WeWork service,
Right.
then they will connect you in that way. So, in
Yeah.
some way, it is a network as well. But
Yeah, so
how,
this is sort of a disconnected version of that,
right,
you know?
right. Um, how much of a guerrilla marketing do you actually do, or do you at all?
I'm doing it right now. Um,
I mean, it's not really guerrilla. It's just you have to watch
um,
and stream.
I I don't necessarily think guerrilla marketing works for our particular industry. You never know. As a designer, I think like guerrilla design definitely makes a big noticeable difference. But as far as guerrilla marketing, I've never experimented with it. Maybe I should try. Maybe I should just like go re-render a building in the neighborhood that has a bad rendering on their sign, and then just get it printed out and glue it on top with our name on the bottom.
And
See how long I
you
can
should make a
actually get
content
a
out of
slab.
this. Like make a
That's
video
a
and it'll do very well on Facebook. Hey,
that's a
look at
great
this, and
idea.
then
I
like
really hope,
yeah, you just do
like,
it.
would that be considered vandalism, or would that
I mean,
how what
isn't
kind of
there
lawsuit would I get?
3D pen artists who go and fix like a little broken brick wall or something like that?
Yes, but he's not covering up somebody else's artwork in the process.
No, then don't cover it up. Just put it next
Put
to
it
it.
next to it. Oh, hey.
Like before and after.
You know what? This is you got I'm writing this down after we get off, and this might be something we do. I think me and the team could get on board with this.
I mean, I don't know how much
Reread
of plagiarism and all the NDA stuff, but it's public, right? So you can't
Yeah,
really
if it's
say
on
it. Yeah.
if it's on a construction sign, it's public, so, re-rendering by Voxel Vision.
Right, right. Contact me if you need something better.
I mean, that'd be pretty brutal for whoever the poor artist was that did it originally, but man, there are some bad ones in the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wanted to. So, I think one
That's
of the
pretty brilliant. I love that.
I did like sort of the critique session of my own renderings that I hired out, some of those professional renderings that I had received, and how it had the Orlando Bloom inside of my
Hmm.
rendering, or some of the celebrities, and this is a shopping mall in Middle East, yet we had bunch of Asian people walking around with inappropriate words that are written over the shirt.
Oh, I've heard about this happening too.
Yeah, and that's that's a kind of critique on its own. And I spoke about how we should just kind of silhouette those people out
Hmm.
and not have anyone in front of the view, that sort of thing. So like the regular rendering practices is what I was
Yep.
speaking about. But in all, I think that sort of do better than what's already shown on the
Yeah.
construction side will be a very interesting And you've also, I wanted to state that as sort of marketing and just kind of selling yourself out there and making known, create a channel. Ted, I've been telling you this many
I
times,
know,
right?
I
And
know.
if people, enough of people, again, you can be this in-house person who's designated to handhold in and teach them whenever they're in trouble. You can be that person, but also you can be that person on the channel and online. So, you know, Ted, this guy is talking about rendering tips and what they need to do in terms of business. And now they're gonna find you, and then at
Yeah,
one point,
yeah.
hey Ted, can you actually do this project for me because this is over the top for me, and also I just don't have enough time.
Hmm.
People will
Yeah,
find you.
yeah. So we're making strides to build a channel. Um, I am. I've got the audio equipment now that I need. I am working on some video equipment that I've already got that I need to set up. The problem I'm facing right now is this particular room is also our guest room, and with most of our friends being,
I thought it was like the
um,
backdrop, it's just like green
no,
screen
this
and
is
the
all
backdrop.
here.
You can actually touch it.
You can touch it.
It's like kunk,
Um,
kunk.
But no, so we have a lot of guests coming in and out now that everybody's becoming vaccinated. People are coming to visit. So my office slash guest room is becoming more guest room than office. And my wife came in here the other day and looked at everything I've got and is like, "So, when are you taking that to work?" I'm like, "I'm not. I'm setting up a microphone." She says, "Hmm,
Hmm.
well, maybe you should look into a larger office space." Like,
Oh.
oh no, this is how it started with our daughter. I got kicked out of my office. She doesn't actually need a room. It's fine.
Well, it's been fine for me, but my son's asking for his room too, and I don't want to give up this
Well,
room. I have to hold on to this one. I may move on to attic or something.
shed.
Yeah, well, if my background suddenly changes to insulation and plywood, then I'll be up in the attic.
Uh, man. So no room for a shed then, huh?
Nope, I live in a townhome, so no
Okay.
shed, nothing.
Attic it is.
Attic it is. It is cooled. It is actually we have a spray foam insulation, so it doesn't look as bad. It's just yellow.
Mm.
And we have a actual AC vent inside, so it is pretty cool in there. It's just
Oh,
that
that's good.
very limited space with amount of storage stuff that we have.
Well, it sounds like a perfect location for a YouTube channel.
Yes, like literally, I should name the channel that way, like the attic, the toxin attic.
Well, at this rate, it's going to be Ted's Shed. It's going to be the YouTube channel because that's where I'm going to get relegated to.
Ted's tent, and just have a
Yeah.
tent outside.
Yep. Well, so I think the first video might be that guerrilla marketing thing. So we'll see. That
Yeah,
sounds fun.
it,
I
it
could get
does
on board with
sound
that.
fun. Yeah, thanks for the idea, Jonathan. That
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think
Well,
we are.
that's an hour quick.
That's our quick pass by. Unless anybody has any more questions or chat to come by, I think we are going to wrap it up here. Do you have any further topics that we wanted to cover perhaps next week? We
Let's
have this
see
one
here.
video that you shared with me that we should also look at together. We can possibly do that.
We should definitely check that out. I've also next week got a webinar on Enscape coming up on the 15th.
You need to
So,
drop the link so I can
yeah,
share here too.
I've got that link, so I'll share it with you and we'll share it with everybody because that'll be a good one.
Why don't you put that
Um,
down in the chat?
I gotta find it first.
All right, whilst he's looking for it, I can. So he's doing a webinar on Enscape. Um, Obviously, he's gonna spell out his methods and secrets that he use on his practices. So I'm sure it will be meaningful. I'll be sure to watch it as well and ask ton of questions.
All right, here
Put
we
him on the
go in
spot.
the chat. Oh God. Let's see here. All right, did that work? It's not a hyperlink, unfortunately, but that's the link. Yep.
Maybe it
Okay.
gets filtered out since.
It probably does.
Why don't you put it down on the Google Doc so I can share it?
That sounds great.
And I'll also leave it in the description as well.
All right, linked.
Exteriors from good to great. What?
Yeah, so it'll be more covering general principles of content generation workflows. So how do you take those models from, let's say, 3ds Max or Turbo Squid or everywhere else, and effectively bring them into your 3D model, either through Enscape's custom asset editor or through something like Transmuter, and then how do you effectively use those elements, and then what kind of hardware do you need to actually run scenes like that, because I think that's the big bottleneck for most people is hardware. So we'll be covering a lot of different global topics that can kind of be covered or that can kind of be used for any rendering application, not just Enscape, but we'll have a lot of opportunity to kind of talk through that and get some cool ideas and hopefully help some people.
Cool.
So
all
now
right.
I got to finish the presentation. So I'll be working on the rest of it tonight.
Awesome. Well, I'll look forward to that. And please, everyone, be sure to register for that one and check out what Ted has to say. And I think we're going to wrap it up there.
All right. Sounds great. Joseph, always a pleasure. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Same here. And I'll see you guys on next week. Thank you, guys.
Sounds good. Night.